Usually at these events, the protocol is to, first I say nice things about all the dignitaries, but I'm going to break with protocol today. Because today is not about very important people, elected officials and dignitaries. This day is about the American people. Today is about the farmer, the mechanic, the school teacher, the truck drivers, the factory workers, waiters, police officers, firemen, and the soldiers and our troops that's serving this great nation around the world. It's about all of us, it's about all of you that make this great country work. John Adams, our second president, and one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, said about this date in a letter to his wife, "The 4th of July, 1776 will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as a great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as a day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized," I had to look that word up, "with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells," I think we have a bell here today, "bonfires and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this day forevermore." So it is fitting that 238 years later, we here in the town of Mount Morris, Illinois, home of the Freedom Bell, will honor the words of one of our greatest founding fathers. So over the past several weeks, I have been thinking hard about what independence and liberty and freedom mean. And what I have personally discovered is that independence, liberty, and freedom mean something different to each of one of us. But more importantly, my weeks of reflection and research have provided me with a few things that could help each of us strengthen our independence, secure our freedoms, and ensure our liberties that we hold so dear. Yesterday, I flew into Chicago from the desert Southwest. As I crossed the Rockies, the Great Plains, in their vastness greeted me. From my 33,000-foot vantage point, I was able to survey the fertile vastness of America's heartland. Corn, wheat, soy, and untold other crops lay out before me. This is the heartland, the corn belt, the breadbasket of this country. As I stared out over the land, it dawned upon me that each field, each crop that I was looking at required a tremendous amount of work to produce the food to feed our nation and even the world. Each year, the land must be tilled, fertilized, seeded, watered, cared for, and harvested until the cycle begins anew. You can't just throw down some seeds and expect a bumper crop year after year. To me, there is a direct correlation between farming and American independence. 238 years ago, 56 of our forefathers planted the seeds of liberty by signing the Declaration of Independence. So strong was their conviction that they mutually pledged to each other their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor. The signing of the Declaration of Independence was only the seed. From that day forward, it was up to us to work the fields of freedom. It was up to us to work the fields of freedom. In the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson so eloquently said, "Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute a new government." In his Gettysburg Address 87 years later, after the Declaration was signed, Abraham Lincoln summed up Jefferson's words in his last line when he said that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people will not perish. So my first point to you is this: like a field of corn, it must be renewed, our freedoms must be renewed and cared for. Vote, be involved in your community, and be aware. If you choose to sit on the sidelines and let others decide for you, then you have already given up some of your independence and freedom. When you say those politicians in Ogle County, Springfield, Illinois, or Washington, D.C., remember the words of Lincoln and Jefferson, that this is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And guess what? You are the people. My second point comes from our third president and author of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, James Madison. He said, "Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives. A popular government," now think about this, and boy, he wrote this a long time ago. A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Simply, knowledge is liberty. So my second point, and I've only got 5, so don't worry. Seek knowledge and truth. Don't let the TV, the press, the paper, or even some colonel, retired colonel, giving a speech on the 4th of July to be your sole source of information. Ask questions of your elected officials and hold them accountable. If they won't listen, make them listen with your vote. The more knowledge you have, the more freedom and independence you will have. I know you are thinking, hey, I'm just but one person in Mount Morris, Illinois, what can I possibly do? Well, a few years back, a neighbor of yours from Dixon made a huge impact on this nation and the world, helping to end the Cold War. His name was Ronald Reagan. And how about a poor black girl from Mississippi, Oprah Winfrey? Arguably, she's one of the most influential women of our time. And how about a man born in a one-room log cabin in Kentucky, who honed his political acumen right here in Illinois' Abraham Lincoln? He was just one man whose conviction held the nation together in the toughest of times and planted the seed of freedom for all in his efforts with the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery. So one person can make a difference. You don't have to attend Harvard or a fancy university to learn. You just have to seek knowledge. Pay attention and learn something new each day. Who knows what you can accomplish? My third point, and it's an odd one, I know, is live within your means. I know this is very odd, but we are a nation 17 trillion in debt. Currently, as a nation, we are spending more than we take in, and that cannot go on forever. Following the financial crisis of 2008, the Greeks' government borrowing rates escalated. And you're thinking, why is he talking about the Greeks? Stay with me. So the Greek government's borrowing rates escalated. Because of their poor financial status and tax infrastructure, the Greek government was forced to accept European Union and International Monetary Fund conditions. As of March this year, their economy has completely tanked. The Greek unemployment rate is 26.8%. As a comparison, right now in Ogle County, it's 8.3%, and I'd say we'd consider that to be high. During the Great Depression, the highest our unemployment ever was, in May of 1933, was 25%, less than what they have in Greece right now. Remember, this is a government of the people, by the people. So if we are all in debt and spending like drunken sailors, I'm sorry to any of my sailor buddies out there, then why should our government be any different? Because it's a government of the people and by the people. However, if we live reasonable within our means, then it makes sense that we will demand the same of our elected officials. This doesn't mean you don't have a mortgage. This doesn't mean you don't have some debt. But maybe you curb your appetite for the next new thing. Each extra dollar you or this country owes someone else means a little less freedom. I bet the Greeks don't feel so independent with the European Union and the IMF breathing down their necks. If you wake up each day and have to work to pay someone off, then in essence you are working for them. I am sure you have all seen the bumper sticker that says, I owe, so off to work I go. Hey, I understand that might be the current reality, but strive not to live the bumper sticker. Live within your means and demand the same from our elected officials. Our nation's financial independence today may be as important as our political independence was in 1776. My fourth point, be a giver, not a taker. America has been a giver. 70 years ago on the shores of Normandy, France, 160,000 Allied troops led by the Americans stormed ashore. Those efforts would liberate Europe and eventually end the deadliest war the world has ever seen. This nation provides hope and remains a beacon for those seeking to be free. The reason I say be a giver and not a taker is simple. If you take or receive all the time, then you rely on someone else. Your existence is tied to what the giver provides. If the giver gives unconditionally, then you have a pretty good gig going. However, in many cases, organizations, governments, and individuals will put conditions on what you receive, how much, and when you get it. Don't get me wrong. Every one of us has been takers at some point. Just ask my dad. But when you are a giver, You free yourself, you become self-reliant, you gain independence. When you give to someone else your time, your advice, or just some cash, you'll gain a sense of fulfillment and worth. If you can help someone become more independent, to grow as a person, then you have played a small part in securing the future independence of our nation. Remember that a free lunch was paid for by someone. I know we live in tough times, but strive to give more than you take. The country will be better, so will you. So my final point is hike your own hike. 36 years ago, I met Colonel Al Wilner. Other than my wife and family, I can honestly say that Al has had the greatest influence on my life. I am living the American dream, and he's a part of it. Al served the Army for 26 years. He's an Army Ranger, paratrooper, air assault qualified, helicopter pilot, and a PhD. He's kind of one of those guys you always want to envy a little bit. Al has always had an independent spirit, forging his own way through life. Al's father was a Holocaust survivor. My guess is Al understands freedom and how precious it is a little more than most because of what he learned from his father. Today, as I talk to you, Al is somewhere in the Berkshire Mountains of western Massachusetts along the famed Appalachian Trail. He has walked more than 1,500 miles of the 2,181-mile journey from Spring Mountain, Georgia to Mount Katahdin in Maine. To give you an idea of how far he has hiked with a 50-pound pack on his back, it's the same as walking from Mount Morris to the Nevada border near the Bonneville Salt Flats. One of the sayings on the Appalachian Trail is hike your own hike, and I think this exemplifies the independent spirit of our great nation. Colonel Wilner has kept a journal of his trip, and to close out, I'm going to share you a short one of his journal entries.